Hey guys, Stealth here, back with more naval guide videos, and this one is about the Redfor command units. So the Redfor command ships used to capture zones and to go on the offensive, because these ships can do both. Now we get the Jiangyu, the Luda, the Nanjin, the Sovremenniy and the Udaloy too. Some of these ships are very specialistic. Most of them have something that they do very well and others that they don't do that well. But all of these command ships are pretty well rounded. Some of them are better than others, of course. I mean, I like the Jiangyu 3 a lot better than I like the Luda. So let's dive into the Jiangyu 3 first. The Jiangyu 3 is classed as a frigate, and as you can see, it's not the biggest of ships. Compare that to the Sovremenniy, and you're going to see that this thing is definitely a lot bigger. So, this ship is classed as a frigate. It comes with one naval gun. Sorry, actually it's one naval gun, but it's a dual battery, so it fires at twice the standard rate of fire. It has one of these on the front, and on the back it has some defensive weaponry. Now you don't actually see these firing, or you don't actually control them with any of your main weapon systems, but they are firing, they are active. I am guessing they are 30mm cannons, but I'm not too sure about that. They can probably be used as a defensive weapon, and you can see two more batteries on the front here. Now the main naval gun you see here is used to go on the offensive. You use this thing to go after ships, to go after ground targets and even air targets, both airplanes and helicopters. So you can pretty much use this as an all-round weapon. Accuracy is 25%, which is not very good. But you got 240 rounds to spend, so you can spend quite a few rounds on a target. Keep in mind though, these guns fire HE damage, so they are not going to cut through a tank very quickly. You will need to fire quite a lot of rounds to take down one tank, and you might be better off using your gun to go after lighter targets, unless that tank is the only one in sight, that is. The Jiangyu 3 also has offensive weaponry to use against ships in the form of these YJ-82 anti-ship missiles. These have a range of 8.7 kilometers, which is one of the highest in the game. They rank right up there with the Harpoon, and some of the Russian units have missiles which range even further, but 8.7 kilometers is definitely not bad. They carry 8 of those, so you can see them here on the bow of the ship. And I believe this is a mobile rotating launcher, so it doesn't matter what way the ship is oriented, so long as the target isn't behind it, that this launcher can fire at it. So it is not as directed as some of the other ships that we've seen on the NATO command ships, where you fire, for example, harpoons over the side of the ship. Actually, sorry, I'm mistaking these two. These are the launchers for the HQ-7 naval SAMs. That's where they're a bit smaller. These are the ship-to-ship missiles. So, sorry to get things confused here, but these fire off to the side. So, like most anti-ship missiles, they fire in bursts of 4 off to the side. That means that if the target's there, you can only use that battery firing port side, and this one only fires starboard. So you have to rotate the ship in order to get both batteries to completely fire all of their weapon systems onto the target. They are pretty accurate, 65%. They do a lot of damage if they hit. 80 AP power is pretty standard for a ship-to-ship missile. They do have quite a bit of reload time, but I believe that they fire in bursts of 4. I haven't really used the Jiangyu 3 in an anti-ship missile capability. I more often use it as a standoff weapon system using the main gun and the HQ-7 naval SAM. Now this naval SAM can also be used in a defensive role, so it can go after incoming missiles, same for this one. That means that it can take down quite a bit of missiles before it runs out, because they do carry 32 of these, which for a frigate is very good. Compare that to the Oliver Hazard Perry, which comes pretty much in at the same price tag, and that ship carries only 16 missiles. Now, it has a range of 2800 meters versus helicopters and airplanes, which means that, of course, anti-ship planes will still outrange this thing by several kilometers, but this ship is not really geared towards taking down air threats. This is more of a secondary role for the ship. They do have a good stabilizer and good accuracy, so they will hit most of the time. 5 HE power means that they're about as about as powerful as most handheld SAMs. And that means that you'll have to fire a number at them to actually hit an aircraft and to kill the aircraft. So that is something that you need to keep in mind. These are not Patriot missiles. They will not do 9 HE damage. The CIWS on this ship, so the anti-missile defense, is very, very good. Jangyu 3s are generally pretty tough to kill. Combine that with 20% ECM and a very high strength of 150. It's not the highest strength in the game, I know that, but for a frigate, which only costs you 160 points, it's not bad. Now still, even with very good CIWS, that does not mean that you should send these ships out alone. Always have them escorted by ships which can provide CIWS fire, so defense against missiles. And a group of 2 or 3 Jangyu 3s together is very, very lethal, both to ships and to shore, and they can provide their CIWS cover to each other to make sure that they are not going to get killed quite easily. They are deep sea sailing ships, as with all of these command ships, I believe. So keep in mind that these things cannot be parked right off the coast. But then again, they don't have to. They got a 4.3 kilometer range on the main gun. Moving on to the Luda. This is a Russian ship, and it carries also one of these main guns. This one is accuracy-wise worse than the one we saw on the Jangyu 3, but it has more range. This one fires at 4,900 meters, this one fires at 4,375. So you can stay even further away from the coast. And to top it off, it fires 8 HE power damage rounds versus 6. That's due to the fact that this is a 130mm gun and this is a 100mm gun. Their CIWS is not as good, it's only medium. Now this is something that is significant, because the Luda has less chances of surviving an enemy missile strike than the Jangyu 3. The Luda is, I'm not going to say the backbone of your anti-ship missile forces, but if you can get one of these high Jing 1J missiles to hit, they do 100 damage. And that means that with 2 or 3 missiles you can sink most of the ships, except for the heaviest ones in the NATO fleet. They fire these from these huge launchers in the middle of the ship. These are rotating launchers, they can go both ways, so if your target's over there, I believe that they will both rotate to the port side and fire in probably bursts of 3, but with some spacing between them, so don't expect 3 missiles to launch at exactly the same time. These things, however, do not have the range that the Jangyu has. The Jangyu has 8,700, these only got 6,000. So you're gonna have to get significantly closer to the enemy target in order to launch these things. But when they do hit, you're gonna sink it. They also have these dual type 76F naval autocannons. And these are used in a defensive role and offensive, because they have even more range than a tank gun. Which is interesting, because most tank guns have a bit better caliber. And normally the higher the caliber, the further the round flies. But these things outrange tanks. They will, however, not do a lot of damage to tanks, because they only fire 1 HE power. They can also be used against helicopters and airplanes, and this is pretty comparable to one of the air defense escort ships that the NATO's ships have in their fleet. So use this thing as an anti-ship unit, mostly. Use it to escort ships like, for example, the Sovremenniy or the Udaloy. And with these ships and these missiles you can do a ton of damage. Just make sure that you escort them properly, or they're going to succumb to those anti-ship missiles. Moving on to the Nanjin. As you can see, it's quite a smaller ship compared to the Luda. Luda is classed as a destroyer, interestingly, and that would make this a frigate. Now, they are not as heavily armed as the Ludas, or at least not main gun-wise. They're back to that 43-75 range, which they share with the Jangyu. It's the same gun, pretty much, except that it fires a lot slower, 24 rounds a minute versus 48. Pretty much due to the fact that this is a solo gun, and the Jangyu has a dual gun. It also has termite missiles. These are some of the most deadly anti-ship missiles in the game. You can see that they're pretty huge. They are on these large launchers on the on the port and the starboard side of the ship. These two tubes. That means they fire forward. They fire toward the ship is pointing, so where the bow is. If you have a ship over there, you can hit it. If you have a ship that's over there, you can probably not hit it without turning the ship. They only fire 2 of these, so don't expect them to take down a capital ship like a Congo on its own, because if both of these things hit, I don't think they would kill the Congo in the first place, and they're never going to hit both at the same time. So if you want the Nanjin to be effective using this anti-ship missile, you also have to distract your target with other weapon systems, where you have to make sure that the anti-missile defenses of that ship are overwhelmed. If you can do it like that, you have a good chance of actually getting through to this target with the Termite missile and do a lot of damage. Their Seawiz is only medium. Have them escorted, make sure they are also in the Seawiz umbrella like the Luda, because medium Seawiz, while it will stop some missiles, it's not going to stop a lot of them. So be careful and make sure that these things are escorted. A note to make about these ships is that they have good optics versus the Luda's very good sea optics and these exceptional sea optics. That points us to the direction that the Nanjin is more or less a ship that is designed to operate near the shore, where it can spot targets for itself using the main gun to pound those, and it can engage helicopters, planes and ground targets with the dual Type 66. Moving on to the major ships of the fleet. This is the Sovremenniy. Very, very heavily armed warship. It fires dual AK-130MR naval guns, and you can see those on the bow of the ship. And I believe they have another battery on the rear of the ship. So dual in this case means that they have both 2 turrets and that there are 2 guns per turret. That puts them at a rate of fire of 72 rounds a minute, firing at 5 km range. They are not the most accurate guns. NATO has much better fire or weapon guiding systems than the Russians apparently, but the Sovremenniy has plenty of other stuff to kill off other ships. This HE power of 8 will do a lot of damage to ships, and if you want to engage a NATO force, which is for example escorted by Chamzuris, you go after the Chamzuris first, make sure that those Seawiz are dead. You do that very, very quickly with the main gun. Then you go to work on, for example, the Congo, which the Chamzuris were escorting. Make sure you knock out the radar on the Congo, activate your muskets, your ship-to-ship missiles, and kill them. That is definitely the best use for this ship. These muskets fire 2 by 2. They have launchers on the bow of the ship. You can see that they carry 8, and that compares with these 8 tubes. Now the fact that it has 8 missiles will not mean that they fire at the same time. They fire 1 by 1, so 1 from the starboard tube and 1 from the port tube. They fire at about 10-second reload time, so you're going to be firing a salvo and then another one. This means that because there's only 2 incoming missiles for the enemy fleet, they are going to be taken down pretty easily. So that's why I usually micromanage these muskets to make sure that I get the most that I get the most explosive power for my money. Let's just put it that way. Bit of a fail there. Anyway, it also carries these naval SAMs. They are radar guided, as with most units. All of these command ships use radar. So make sure that a seaplane cannot get too close, because a seed missile cannot be stopped, as with all command units, or all ships I should say. These Still 1 naval SAMs have a very, very nice range, 4,500 meters, 3,500 against helicopters, so helicopters cannot approach this ship to try and get a shot at it with their ATGMs without getting shot down. Same for planes, although NATO planes have a harpoon range of 5.2 kilometers, which means that they are probably going to stay outside the range of this ship. Sometimes ships or anti-ship planes will have to fly a bit closer, like for example the ships which are armed with the airplanes which are only armed with a 4.5 kilometer range. Those will have to get inside the range of this warship, and then the warship, if it's not too busy taking down those ship-to-ship missiles or anti-ship missiles, can take down the plane. If you want to, you can micromanage the Sovremenniy to fire at the plane instead of at the missile. This will damage your ship a little bit, but it has 250 points of strength and it has very good sea whiz. So that means that this ship doesn't always have to rely on these Still 1 missiles. By the way, the Still 1 missile launcher is on the bow of the ship, you can see it here. It seems to be carrying only one missile, and that's because the moment the missile has fired, this machine goes up. A new missile is jammed into the launcher and it starts to go horizontal again like that. That's how that system works. Keep in mind that these ships have 20% ECM, which is okay, but they're not going to be deflecting as many missiles as some of the NATO units. They also have very bad stealth. That means that they are going to be detected pretty much by the time they enter the battlefield. They have exceptional sea optics and they're pretty fast. Use that speed to quickly bridge distances between you and the enemy fleet so that these guns can get into range. And once you are in range, make sure that the ship turns sideways so that you have your profile like this. And this means that this unit can fire with both those guns and the guns on the rear of the ship. With that, you get a lot more fire on target than if you're just facing at it like this, dead on, with only these guns firing. Finally, the Udaloy 2. This ship is also geared towards anti-ship warfare. And you can see that it has pretty comparable stats to the Sovremenniy, but they are somewhat different on some aspects. The guns are exactly the same, but they don't fire that many rounds. They got 480 versus 720. So this means that they don't have that many rounds, and with a 20% accuracy they're pretty much less effective than the Sovremenniy, because the Sovremenniy could just put up this volume of fire for 10 minutes straight before it runs out of ammo, and this thing can do it only for about 6 to 7 minutes, depending on how panicked the unit is. The Udaloy, like the Sovremenniy, carries the P270 musket, again fired from tubes on the front, and as was remarked by other people as well, these ships aren't particularly pretty, but they are stocked to the brim with weapons. They got weapons all over. Some of these weapons will fire and you cannot even see them, but what we can see is the Kinzai or Kinzol naval SAMs, which are mounted here on the sides of the ship. These have a defensive tag, so they can be used to defend against missiles like the main gun. And they do a range against helicopters of 2450 and airplanes 3150. That means that this ship is not as good against airplanes as the Sovremenniy, but it trades that for exceptional sea whiz, a little less speed but more strength, 300 versus 250. Now, if you wanted to, you can have both of these ships at the same time in your naval section, especially if you're using a standard deck, but even more so when you're using a Marines deck. And having these ships close together in an overlapping field of fire, especially with their sea whiz, makes them, I'm not going to say invulnerable, but exceptionally hard to kill. Because this ship will engage the airplanes at very, very long range, and if the airplanes do return fire, the Udaloy will take them down using exceptional sea whiz and the Kinzai missiles. Their ECM is also better, so they're less easy to get a missile hit onto. Stealth is bad, like with the Sovremenniy. Armor is the same on all ships, and keep in mind that if you micromanage these muskets, you're going to do a bit more damage if you activate them at the right time. And the right time is when you see a notification of radar crippled, radar operator dead, stuff like that. If the radar of a ship is down, a ship-to-ship missile or an anti-ship missile cannot be stopped by its defenses. Of course, it can still be stopped by the defenses of surrounding ships, but not by the ship that is crippled. So if it's a lonely ship, say you're facing off against a lonely Congo, you manage to get a couple of hits on its radar, and those seem to be completely random. You see the radar go down, that's when you activate the muskets on both the Udaloy 2 and the Sovremenniy, and you're going to do a ton of damage to the ship very, very quickly, and you take it down. So that concludes the naval command units for the Redfor. Let me know what you think. Do you have any special unit that you particularly like, and if yes, why? Leave me a note in the comments below telling me why you like the unit and what is your preference. If you liked the video, please hit like. If you want to see more naval guide units, there are more. I have a playlist ready for you. The link to that playlist is in the description. For now, thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you next video.